Okay, so welcome everyone to the deep dive. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the 75-year history of Medtronic today. I mean, seriously, this company has shaped so much of what we know about modern medicine. And to guide us, we have this book here called The Medtronic Story: 75 Years of Medical Innovation. It's I'll tell you what, this thing is detailed. So think of this deep dive as like your shortcut to understanding the big moments in their journey, the moments that really matter.
Yeah, that's it. Spot on. It's not just, a dry company history. No way. It's a story about, really, it's a story about human ingenuity and finding those aha moments, those times when things clicked, and a really strong commitment to their mission. And that mission took them from, well, you wouldn't believe it, from a tiny beginning all the way to being a global healthcare leader. I mean, they're huge. So yeah, we want to pull out those key insights for you, the things that make you think, wow, I didn't know that.
Exactly. You, our listener, you're here to get smart on this, right? And you want to do it quickly, but you don't want to miss anything. Well, you are in the right place. We're going to take you through all of this in a way that hopefully makes sense, keeps you interested, and gives you those really important details. So, shall we start at the very beginning? We're talking 1949, a garage in Minneapolis. Sounds humble, right?
Super humble.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's where it all started. Earl Bakken and Palmer Hermoonsley, they started a little medical equipment repair business. But you have to think about the time, right? This is 1949. Medical electronics. That was like the new frontier. Most hospitals, they had no clue how to keep these newfangled machines running. They were complex.
Oh, totally. It's like, can you imagine your EKG machine goes kaput? You can call.
Yeah.
Bakken and Hermoonsley, that's who. They were the go-to guys, the fix-it crew. But honestly, those early days, they were tough. The book even mentions a month, get this, where they made only $8. $8. I mean, that shows you just how hard it was to get going.
It does. It really does. But you know what else it shows? It shows their dedication. They were a small team, like a garage gang, they called them. But they were driven by, by this desire to actually make a difference, use their skills, their technical know-how to help people. And I think that wanting to contribute, it's at the heart of why Medtronic has done so well, why they've lasted.
And it wasn't just fixing stuff either. Bakken, this guy, he was an inventor. Right from the start, he was tinkering. I mean, apparently he made over 100 custom devices. Think about that. Custom made for researchers. Like one-of-a-kind stuff. And often he was using like spare parts,
Yeah.
He was a real tinkerer, a problem solver.
But the thing, right, he was solving problems that doctors and researchers were having.
Yeah.
Real-world problems.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like buying something off the shelf. These were custom solutions.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that collaboration that really set the stage for Medtronic.
We're talking like early defibrillators, heart monitors, all that kind of stuff, packed up, get this, in newspaper and used boxes. You can't imagine that today, right? But it really shows you it was about ingenuity, it was about making do, and it was about working directly with the doctors, the people who are taking care of patients. It's like they say, necessity is the mother of invention.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And that early phase, even though it was small, it was so important. It was like the foundation for everything that was going to come later. That problem solving, the teamwork, it became part of who they were. Now, fast forward a bit, 1957. Halloween night. A blackout. You wouldn't think a blackout would be a big deal, but this one, well, it changed things.
This wasn't just any blackout. I mean, the power went out in Minneapolis, and it had a huge impact on the hospitals, especially in the unit where children were recovering from open heart surgery. These kids, they were relying on pacemakers, but back then, the pacemakers, well, they had to be plugged into the wall.
Yeah, and when the power went out, those pacemakers, they just stopped. Can you imagine? It must have been just chaos. The doctors, they were desperate, trying to save these kids. But one infant, well, he didn't make it.
Yeah, that really gets to you, right? It really shows how much we depend on technology, especially in life or death situations.
Yeah.
And it really hit Dr. C. Walton Lillehei hard. He was a pioneer in heart surgery, this guy. And the next day, he went straight to Earl Bakken with a challenge.
Oh, yeah. I bet he was still shaken up from that night. And he basically told Bakken, look, we need a pacemaker that doesn't rely on the power grid. It needs to run on batteries. Like, it was urgent. It was a matter of life and death. It had to be done.
And Bakken, being Bakken, he took it on, right? He tried using a car battery, can you imagine, with an inverter. But obviously that was too big, too clunky. You couldn't use that on a patient.
I mean, it shows you where technology was at the time, right? Batteries. They weren't what they are today. But then, get this, Bakken got inspired by an article, a magazine article in Popular Electronics. It was about, of all things, a metronome circuit.
Talk about finding inspiration in unexpected places, right? Bakken, he saw something in that basic circuit. It produced steady electrical pulses, and that was the key. He adapted that design, and boom, he created a small, battery-powered pacemaker prototype. It was still kind of big, like a paperback book, but it was a breakthrough.
The biggest thing, though, was how it delivered the pacing. This new design, it sent electrical pulses straight to the heart, right through wires. No more of those big external electrodes, and more importantly, patients didn't have to be plugged into the wall. This was freedom.
So they tested it, right? First in the lab, then on a dog, and it worked. And when Bakken showed that prototype to Dr. Lillehei, well, he didn't waste any time. He used it right away on a child who was recovering from surgery.
I can't imagine what that moment must have been like for Bakken. Seeing his invention, something he built, actually keeping a kid alive. That must have been incredibly powerful.
It was the birth of mobile pacing, really. Word spread like wildfire. And soon, hospitals were placing orders left and right. It was a game changer.
But they didn't stop there. The next year, 1958, Medtronic teamed up with Dr. William Shardak and an engineer, Wilson Greatbatch, and they came up with the first implantable pacemaker. Like, that was a whole other level, putting the technology right inside the patient.
And in 1960, they secured the exclusive rights to make these implantable pacemakers. That's when things really shifted, you know. They went from just fixing devices to, like, making and selling their own life-saving technology on a big scale.
And the demand was huge. They got 50 orders for those implantable units in just the last 2 months of 1960. It's crazy to think. In just 10 years, they went from a garage to being a leader in this whole new field of cardiac electronics.
Yeah, they were like literally giving people battery-powered heartbeats. But with success comes growing pains, right? They moved out of that garage in 1960 into their first real headquarters, and they had to build a sales force to cover the whole country, even Canada.
Totally. Growth is exciting, but it's complicated. And they were expanding their product line too. They were making heart monitors, defibrillators, all kinds of devices with these like cool names, you know, the Telecore heart monitor, the cardiac sentinel alarm.
I love those old school names.
Wow.
And their sales, they were taking off. In 1960, they made $180,000. By 62, it was over $500,000. But all that expansion, all that investment, it really put a strain on their finances.
Yeah, and this is interesting. Around 1960, they almost went bankrupt. Like, seriously, all the money they were putting into research and development, new facilities, it was outpacing their sales. It was a make-or-break moment for them.
And Bakken, how he reacted to this, it's pretty remarkable. He didn't just panic. He sat down and wrote out a clear mission statement. Like, this was 1960, and that mission statement, it still guides them today. It's pretty powerful stuff.
The first line of that mission statement, it really sums it up. To contribute to human welfare by application of biomedical engineering to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. I mean,
Yeah.
You can't get much clearer than that, can you?
Alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. That was more than just words. It was their DNA. And Bakken actually wrote out 6 tenets that emphasized things like quality, integrity, how they treated their employees, being good corporate citizens. But at the heart of it all, it was about the patients.
And what's amazing is that mission statement, it hasn't changed, not one bit since 1960.
Yeah.
It's a testament to how solid it was, how timeless. It still guides everyone at Medtronic through all the changes and growth.
And Bakken, he was a leader who, he understood that a mission statement wasn't enough. You had to live it, you know? He created a culture of empathy, of service. He wanted everyone to remember that behind every device, there was a real person.
He made that connection real, tangible. He started this tradition, the annual holiday party.
Yeah.
And he would invite patients, people whose lives had been changed by Medtronic devices. They would come and share their stories with the employees.
Can you imagine? Kids running around thanks to pacemakers, people living without pain because of their therapies. It really showed everyone what it was all about, that they weren't just making things, they were making a difference. It's like Fortune magazine said, what Medtronic does is not the same as making VCRs.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that mission focus, it helped them through those growing pains, through all the technical challenges. They kept making their pacemakers better, longer battery life, more reliable, safer leads, you know. They were also starting to think about how they could use what they knew about electrical stimulation to help with other problems, like chronic pain. That's where the early neuromodulators came in.
So the 60s, that was a huge decade for Medtronic. Not only did they establish themselves in cardiac electronics, but they also solidified their mission. They were ready for the 70s, and that's when they went global.
Yeah, the 70s were all about growth, and I mean serious growth. By the mid-70s, they had something like 35% of the global pacemaker market. Surgeons were using their pacemakers more and more, and their sales just exploded.
I mean, exploded is right. In 75, they hit $100 million in sales. By 79, it was over $200 million. That's insane growth.
And a big moment for them, it showed they were becoming a major player, was when they got listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 77. They weren't a little startup anymore. They were a big, publicly traded company.
But they didn't just stick to pacemakers. In the 70s and 80s, they started branching out. They went into diabetes care, neurosurgery, orthopedic, and spinal therapies. These were big moves that set them up for the future.
Oh yeah, big time. Like in 77, they came out with the Medtronic Hall mechanical heart valve. This thing was huge. It was used all over the world to replace diseased heart valves. They also came up with these steroid-eluting cardiac leads, which made pacemakers last longer. And they introduced dual-chamber pacemakers, which were a big step forward.
Yeah, those dual-chamber pacemakers, they were smart. They could coordinate the rhythm between the two main chambers of the heart. It was like a more natural heartbeat. And they weren't afraid to acquire companies, to bring in new technology. They bought companies like Medical Data Systems, which did nuclear imaging, and energy technology, which became Chromion, so they could make their own lithium batteries. They even bought a Dutch pacemaker company called Vitatron.
It was all about expanding their reach, getting into new markets, and they were going global in a big way. They set up headquarters in Europe and Latin America and built manufacturing plants all over the world.
And as they were growing, Earl Bakken, he started to step back from the day-to-day. He became chairman in 74 and eventually handed over the CEO role, but he was still the heart and soul of the company.
And even as they grew and the leadership changed, they never lost sight of that mission. In 79, they started the Medtronic Foundation, which does all sorts of good work around the world. They also created the Bakken Society to honor their top scientists and engineers.
They were all about giving back, and they were always pushing the boundaries of technology. In the late 70s and 80s, they came up with implantable neurostimulators to treat chronic pain. They also worked on the first deep brain stimulation, or DBS, system for movement disorders. That was a big breakthrough in 1987.
Oh yeah, DBS was huge. It was a whole new way to treat conditions like Parkinson's disease and essential tremor. They also developed their first implantable cardioverter defibrillator, the ICD, in 93. That's like an internal defibrillator that can shock your heart back into rhythm if it goes haywire.
And these new products, DBS, ICDs, neurostimulators, they all became massive successes. They were helping millions of people who didn't have any other options.
And they were plowing money back into research and development. They knew that innovation was the key to their success. That's how they kept coming up with better and better devices, like the programmable SpecTrax pacemaker and the rate-responsive ActiveTrax pacemaker.
So by the end of the 80s, Medtronic was a very different company. They weren't just the pacemaker people anymore. They were in 6 different areas of healthcare, and they were a global force.
Right. And all this growth, it was guided by a series of really strong leaders. Earl Bakken, he was the visionary, the guy who set the tone. He loved science, he loved collaboration, and he built a company culture that reflected that.
Yeah, Bakken's legacy, it's more than just the battery-powered pacemaker. He created a company with a heart, a company that cared. And after he stepped down, guys like Winston Wynne Wallen came in. He was all about business processes and global expansion. He's the one who got them to over $1 billion in sales.
Then there was Bill George. He understood that you had to have both. You had to be profitable, but you also had to have a purpose. He expanded them into new areas, but he also made sure the employees felt connected to the patients they were helping. He would even hand out these little wallet cards with the mission statement on them.
He really believed in that mission. And then Art Collins came along. He kept the growth going with big acquisitions like Sofamor Danek, which got them into the spine business, and MiniMed, which made them a leader in diabetes technology. And then there was Bill Hawkins. He had to deal with some tough times like regulatory hurdles and product recalls, but he also pushed forward with innovations like transcatheter heart valves, which were a less invasive way to fix heart valves.
And then Omar Ishrak became CEO. He was the first person of color to lead Medtronic, and he was the first one hired from outside the company. He brought a global perspective, focused on efficiency, and made a huge move by acquiring Covidium. He also really pushed for making their therapies more accessible in developing countries.
And now we have Jeff Martha. He's leading Medtronic through some pretty big challenges like the pandemic and supply chain issues, but he's also looking ahead to the future. Things like AI, surgical robotics, and personalized medicine. And through it all, they've never lost sight of that mission.
It's really amazing how they've managed to keep that mission alive through all these changes. Now, let's talk about some of the specific technologies that have come out of Medtronic over the years. It's a pretty impressive list.
Oh, absolutely. Let's start with the ones that they're known for, the cardiac rhythm devices, the pacemakers, and defibrillators.
Yeah, pacemakers have come a long way, from those big clunky things to the tiny devices we have today. I
Yeah.
mean, the batteries last way longer now. They're programmable. They can adjust to your activity level. They can even detect irregular heart rhythms.
Mm.
Then there's the micro leadless pacemaker, which is just mind-blowing. It's the size of a vitamin, and it's implanted directly into the heart. No wires needed.
It's like science fiction, right? And then there are the ICDs, the implantable cardioverter defibrillators. They're like having a little guardian angel in your chest, ready to zap your heart back into rhythm if it goes crazy.
Exactly.
Ah.
But, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. In 2007, they had that big recall of the Sprint Fidelis leads. Those are the wires that connect the ICD to the heart. They found that a small percentage of them could fracture, which was obviously a big problem.
Yeah, that was a tough time, but they handled it well. They stopped selling the leads right away and worked with doctors and patients to make sure everyone was safe. And it led to better designs and stricter quality control across the industry.
It's always a learning process.
Yeah.
But Medtronic, they're not just about electrical heart stuff. They've also done a lot in heart valves, mechanical pumps, and other cardiac support technologies. Remember the Medtronic mechanical heart valve? That was a big one.
Oh, yeah, that was used all over the world for years. They also got into tissue valves, which are made from biological materials, and they're now a big player in transcatheter heart valves, which are less invasive. And they've acquired companies that make ventricular assist devices, or VADs, which are like pumps that help weak hearts. They even make parts for heart-lung bypass machines.
And then there's diabetes. They got into that big time when they bought MiniMed in 2001. That made them a leader in insulin pumps for type 1 diabetes. And they've been developing these amazing closed-loop systems, which are basically like artificial pancreases.
Yeah, those closed-loop systems, they're incredible. They use a sensor to monitor your blood sugar and then automatically adjust the amount of insulin your pump delivers. It's a huge step towards making life easier for people with diabetes.
And the MiniMed 670G system, that was the first one that could do that automatically 24/7. That was a big deal when it got approved in 2016. But Medtronic, they're not just about hearts and diabetes. They've also done incredible things in the neurological and spinal fields.
Yeah, their neurostimulators for chronic pain have been a lifesaver for so many people. And their spinal modulation business, which got a big boost when they bought Sofamorganic, offers all sorts of solutions for back and neck problems. And then there's deep brain stimulation, or DBS, which has been revolutionary for people with movement disorders.
DBS, that was developed with some brilliant French neurosurgeons. And when it came out with the Activa DBS device in the late 90s, it was a game changer for people with Parkinson's and tremors. But they've also had some bumps in the road with their neurological devices. Remember the infused bone graft product?
Oh, yeah, that one got them into some hot water. They were accused of promoting it for uses it wasn't approved for, and there were questions about whether some of the research on it was biased. It was a big lesson for them and for the whole industry about being transparent and ethical.
Definitely. But they've also shown that they can step up in a crisis. Like during the COVID-19 pandemic, they open-sourced the design for their ventilators so that other companies could make them too. They knew that hospitals were desperate for ventilators, and they wanted to help.
Yeah, that was a really good move. And they also ramped up their own ventilator production and came up with remote monitoring solutions so that patients could be cared for from a distance. And they've had to deal with all the supply chain disruptions and inflation that everyone else has been facing. But they're still investing in R&D, they're still innovating.
They've also made some big acquisitions recently, like Maser Robotics, which does spine surgery robotics, and Intersect ENT, which makes sinus implants. They've also sold off some businesses that weren't as important to them, like renal care solutions, so they can focus on their core areas.
And they're still coming out with new products. The Evolute transcatheter aortic valve, the Micra AV leadless pacemaker, the MiniMed 780G system for diabetes. They're even getting into digital health tools. They're everywhere.
They're a global company now, operating in over 160 countries with over 95,000 employees. And they're trying to make healthcare more accessible in developing countries. They're developing low-cost devices for India, setting up clinics in Africa, And they have a goal of reaching an additional 25 million people who need care.
It's amazing how much they've grown. And through it all, they've stuck to that mission that Earl Bakken laid out all those years ago. You talk to people who work at Medtronic, and they'll tell you about their mission moments, those times when they see how their work is actually making a difference in people's lives.
It's a powerful thing. So what's next for Medtronic? What does the future hold? It seems like AI and data science are going to be huge.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Jess Martha, the CEO, he's been talking a lot about how AI can personalize healthcare in ways we can't even imagine yet. We're already seeing it being used to improve surgery, predict patient outcomes, and make devices smarter. The idea is to make technology so seamless that it just fades into the background and people can focus on living their lives.
And they're really focused on making healthcare more accessible and affordable in developing countries. They're doing this frugal innovation thing where they develop cost-effective solutions and they're partnering with local organizations. It's the right thing to do, and it's also a smart business move.
We're probably going to see a lot more collaboration in healthcare in general, with companies working together to solve big problems. And Medtronic, they're in a good position to lead the way. They're financially strong, they're committed to R&D, and they have that mission driving them.
But they can't rest on their laurels. They're in a competitive industry, and they need to stay nimble, keep that startup spirit alive. And as technology keeps advancing, they're going to have to be careful about the ethical implications. They'll need to rely on those core values that Bakken instilled to make sure they're doing the right thing.
You know, it's been quite a ride, hasn't it? From that little garage to a global healthcare giant. They've innovated, they've grown, they've faced challenges, but they've never lost sight of their mission.
It's a remarkable story, really inspiring. They've shown what's possible when you combine ingenuity with a deep sense of purpose.
So, to sum it all up, what we've learned from Medtronic's 75 years is this. They started from humble beginnings. They came up with life-saving innovations like the battery-powered pacemaker. They have a mission that has guided them through thick and thin. They've grown and diversified into all sorts of medical fields. They've faced challenges and overcome them, and they're still committed to making healthcare better for everyone.
And for you, our listener, we hope you've learned some interesting stuff today, stuff that made you think, wow, I didn't know that. We've tried to give you a real sense of the impact Medtronic has had and continues to have on modern medicine.
And here's one last thing to think about. Remember that power blackout in 1957? It seems like a small thing, but it led to the invention of the battery-powered pacemaker, which changed everything. It makes you wonder what small events are happening today that could lead to big changes in healthcare in the future. It's something to think about, isn't it? And maybe it'll inspire you to learn more about what's happening in the world of medical technology. Anyway, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Medtronic. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely.
See you next time.
See you.